Hello and welcome to Story Verdict. Today I'm going to tell you the story of forced to serve his mistress as a maid at the Victory Gala. They fainted when I revealed I bought 100% of their family debt at dawn. The story goes like this. The first time my husband asked me to kneel at his mistress's feet, he was standing beneath a chandelier I had paid for, inside a ballroom financed by a loan I secretly owned, celebrating a billion-dollar contract that existed only because I had spent 7 years protecting him from the consequences of his own ambition. My name is Aria Vale, though most of the financial world knew me only as A. Voss, the anonymous chairwoman and controlling founder of Vanguard Capital, a private investment group that owned banks, insurance funds, infrastructure portfolios, distressed debt platforms, and enough quiet influence to change the future of a company without appearing in a single newspaper photograph. Julian Cross, my husband of 9 years, believed I was an ordinary housewife who had once studied accounting but lacked the confidence to build a serious career. His mother, Eleanor, believed I had married above my station and survived only because her son was too compassionate to abandon me. For almost a decade, I allowed both of them to believe that, because when I first met Julian, he was not cruel. He was 28, exhausted, and sitting alone in the corner of a nearly empty cafe, with a stack of unpaid invoices and a business plan covered in handwritten corrections. His father's construction finance company had collapsed after a partner disappeared with client deposits, leaving Julian with debts he had not created, employees who had not been paid, and a mother who responded to every crisis by reminding him that the Cross family had once mattered. I was 26 then, recently returned from London after building an algorithm that identified undervalued debt portfolios, before banks understood what they owned. I had already earned more money than I knew how to explain, but I traveled without an assistant, wore plain clothes, and preferred listening to people who did not know they should impress me. Julian did not ask what I owned. He asked whether I thought a company could survive after losing public trust. I told him trust was not restored through speeches, but through accurate numbers, visible sacrifice, and promises small enough to keep. We talked until the cafe closed. 3 months later, I invested in his company through an anonymous restructuring fund. 6 months later, we were engaged. Before the wedding, I considered telling him everything. My attorney, Charles Henderson, advised caution. A man who loves you without knowing your power may become a man who resents you after discovering it, he said. I accused him of cynicism. He replied that financial law was simply cynicism with filing deadlines. I told Julian that I had family investments and consulting income but preferred a simple life. He said money did not matter to him. At the time, I believed he meant it. I arranged a rescue package for Cross Meridian Holdings through Vanguard's Special Situations Division. The company's vendors were paid, its predatory loans refinanced, and its reputation restored under a new board. Julian believed a mysterious overseas investor named Rowan Crest had seen potential in him. Rowan Crest was one of my trusts. I structured the loan with generous terms, long repayment periods, and an ethical conduct clause designed to protect employees and clients if leadership engaged in fraud, harassment, misuse of corporate funds, or actions creating serious reputational damage. The clause also allowed immediate acceleration of secured debt if Julian transferred assets through deception or used the company to conceal personal misconduct. I included it because every responsible lender did. I never imagined I would one day activate it against my husband. Julian's business recovered. He moved from small commercial projects into luxury developments, financial advisory services, and international acquisitions. Each time he reached a barrier, I opened a door quietly. When a bank rejected his expansion facility, Vanguard purchased the loan and approved a revised package after independent review. When a foreign investor questioned his experience, I arranged for one of my senior partners to endorse his company. When his largest client threatened litigation over a delayed project, my legal team negotiated a settlement before Julian knew the complaint had reached court. I did not perform miracles. Cross Meridian had capable employees, good engineers, and several profitable divisions. But without my capital, debt protection, and introductions, it would have failed at least 4 times. Julian interpreted survival as proof of his instinct. Eleanor interpreted it as evidence that her son had restored the family name through extraordinary talent. I interpreted it as marriage. I believed helping the person I loved without demanding recognition was generosity. I did not understand that invisible support often becomes invisible by design. The more I protected Julian from failure, the more he began to believe failure happened only to people less capable than he was. Our life changed slowly. We moved from a rented apartment into a townhouse, then into the Cross Estate, a limestone mansion overlooking the river. Julian said the house belonged to his family's legacy. In reality, Eleanor had lost it to foreclosure 2 years before we married. Vanguard Residential Trust purchased the debt, restored the property, and granted Julian a renewable occupancy agreement tied to the corporate loan. I told him an investor had helped preserve the estate as part of the restructuring. He never asked who. Eleanor moved into the East Wing and immediately began treating me as a tolerated guest. She criticized my plain dresses, my quiet voice, and my refusal to hire a personal stylist. At breakfast, she asked whether I planned to do anything useful now that Julian had become successful. When I said I handled household finances and occasionally reviewed contracts, she laughed. My son has accountants for that. A wife should improve a man's image, not pretend to understand his work. I could have corrected her by placing Vanguard's annual report on the table and showing her my signature beneath $80 billion in managed assets. Instead, I poured more coffee and reminded myself that Julian loved me. At first, he defended me. Arya supported me before any of this, he would say. Eleanor answered, emotionally perhaps. Over time, his defense weakened. He began asking me not to discuss business around investors because my questions made them uncomfortable. He said I was intelligent but lacked the polish required for executive rooms. He encouraged me to stop wearing glasses at formal dinners because they made me look severe. He told me not to mention that I reviewed his contracts because people might think he needed help from his wife. Each request seemed small. Together, they reduced me into the shape he preferred, useful in private, invisible in public. I accepted the arrangement longer than I should have because I remembered the man in the cafe. The one who had asked honest questions and thanked waiters by name. I thought success had merely exhausted him. I told myself love required patience. Then Vivian Ashcroft entered our lives. She was the only daughter of Malcolm Ashcroft, founder of Ashcroft Sovereign Partners, a family office seeking control of a massive urban renewal contract. Vivian was 32, elegant, publicly charitable, and skilled at making people feel selected. She joined Cross Meridian's advisory board during negotiations for the $1 billion Riverside Crown development. Julian said her presence would reassure investors. Eleanor called her the kind of woman who understands legacy. I noticed the way Julian's expression changed when Vivian entered a room, but I did not immediately assume an affair. Wealthy people often performed intimacy because business rewarded the illusion of private access. Then I saw the hotel charges. Cross Meridian's corporate account paid for a 2-bedroom presidential suite during a conference Julian attended with Vivienne. He told me he had stayed in an ordinary executive room. Vanguard's compliance system flagged the expense because the company's debt covenants prohibited personal luxury charged to secured accounts. I reviewed the records myself. There were dinners for two, jewelry purchases described as client gifts, private flights, and monthly transfers to a consulting company owned by Vivienne. The payments began 11 months earlier. I did not confront Julian immediately. I requested an independent audit because I refused to use ownership as permission to convert suspicion into fact. The audit confirmed misuse of funds, altered invoices, and communications showing a personal relationship. In one message, Vivian wrote, "How long will you keep the housewife?" Julian answered, "Until the Riverside contract closes. Arya is harmless, but divorce before financing would create questions." Vivian replied, "Your mother says she can make Arya leave without a settlement." Eleanor knew. Another message came from Julian to his private attorney. "The estate and company are effectively mine. Arya has no independent income worth pursuing. Prepare a postnuptial acknowledgement, stating she contributed only domestic support." The document was intended to reduce my claim during divorce. It contained a valuation of my supposed personal assets, $12,000 in savings. An old car, jewelry Julian believed he had purchased, and no business interests. I stared at the numbers in my office at Vanguard Tower and felt something inside me become quiet. I did not cry. I had spent years managing bankrupt families, hostile acquisitions, and fraud investigations. I knew the difference between anger and evidence. Anger demanded confrontation. Evidence demanded patience. Henderson sat across from me while the messages filled the wall screen. We can disclose your identity, terminate the occupancy agreement, accelerate the loans, and petition for receivership today, he said. Not yet, Arya. Your husband is diverting secured funds to his mistress and preparing fraudulent marital documents. The audit must finish. It has enough. Enough for intervention, not enough to map every transfer. Henderson studied me. You are giving him another chance. I am determining how many people require protection. Employees, vendors, pension funds, project clients, and innocent minority shareholders. And Julian? He will receive exactly what law permits. That was not my question. I looked again at his message calling me harmless. Part of me still wants him to look me in the eye and tell the truth before he knows who I am. Henderson leaned back. Hidden tests are dangerous. I know. You are testing whether the man you married still exists. Yes. And if he fails, then we stop financing the person he became. The final audit report arrived 2 weeks before the Victory Gala. Cross Meridian had secured preliminary approval for the Riverside Crown project, but the billion-dollar commitment depended on verified equity, continued lender support, and ethical certification by its leadership. Julian told the public the contract was complete. In reality, Vanguard Capital controlled the senior debt, the bridge financing, the estate mortgage, and the revolving credit lines supporting nearly every division. Vivian's father had promised junior investment only if Vanguard remained committed. Julian believed Rowan Crest, the anonymous senior investor, would never interfere because it had rescued him repeatedly. He referred to the fund in private messages as the silent grandfather who signs whatever I need. I was 35 and had no children. The description almost amused me. The gala was scheduled at the Cross Estate on the anniversary of the company's recovery. 500 guests were invited: investors, bankers, developers, politicians, celebrities, and employees. Julian planned to announce both the Riverside Crown Agreement and his new strategic partnership with Vivienne. A media consultant prepared language presenting her as the woman behind his success. I was not included in any official program. 3 days before the event, Julian entered our bedroom while I was reading and placed a black garment bag on the bed. Mother chose something appropriate for you, he said. Inside was a fitted service uniform. Black trousers, white blouse, black waistcoat, and a short apron embroidered with the Cross family crest. I looked at him. What is this? The household staff is short tomorrow. Several temporary servers canceled. Hire replacements. It is too late. You want your wife to serve drinks at your Victory Gala. He sighed as though I had misunderstood a reasonable request. I need everyone contributing. You always say you prefer staying out of photographs. That is different from wearing an employee uniform. Vivienne's family will be there. The press will be watching. You are uncomfortable at formal events and sometimes say things that confuse investors. What things? Questions about leverage, debt structure, and disclosure. Those are relevant to a billion-dollar contract, not when asked by someone who is not part of management. The sentence remained between us. I am your wife. Exactly. Support me privately. By carrying trays, by showing humility. People respect a family that works together. Will Eleanor carry trays? His jaw tightened. Do not make this difficult. Will Vivienne? She is a board advisor and principal investor. And what am I? He looked away. You are Arya. It sounded like an answer and an absence. I will attend as your wife. No, the word came too quickly. Why? Because the evening is important and I cannot spend it managing your feelings. My feelings? You have been cold toward Vivienne. Mother noticed. Investors noticed tension. Wear the uniform, stay near the staff corridor, and let me complete the contract. What happens after the contract? He rubbed his forehead. We will discuss our marriage after the project closes. Are you planning to leave me? I am planning to survive a major transition. With Vivienne, he did not answer. That was the final chance. He had no idea that I possessed the evidence. Owned the debt, controlled the estate, and could end the performance with a single call. He could have told me the truth. Instead, he said, "Do not embarrass yourself tomorrow." I folded the uniform carefully. "I will wear it." Relief crossed his face. "Thank you. You may not feel grateful for long." "What does that mean?" "Nothing you would believe tonight." He kissed my forehead as though rewarding obedience and left. I called Henderson. "Prepare midnight protocol." Full acceleration? Confidential. Protect payroll, client funds, active projects, and lawful minority interests. Freeze disputed executive accounts. Preserve medical coverage and pensions. Estate? Receivership activates only after evidence of commercial misuse during the gala and execution of the fraudulent moral certification. Personal belongings? Inventory. No one loses medicine, clothing, or independent property. Vivienne? Her consulting payments and gifts are disputed corporate assets. Her lawful personal property remains hers. And the debt purchase? Complete acquisition of every cross-family obligation available on the secondary market before midnight. Mortgages, personal guarantees, vehicle loans, club balances, tax liens, and company debt. Henderson paused. That will cost more than $200 million. Vanguard already owns most of it. The remaining creditors will sell at a discount if they learn there is enforcement risk. Do not disclose private information improperly. We can make standard portfolio offers. Do it. What message do you want delivered at 12:01? I looked at the service uniform on the bed. Emergency acceleration. No waiver. Aria. Yes, once activated, this cannot return to marriage. The marriage ended when he selected my apron. The morning of the gala. Eleanor entered my dressing room without knocking. She wore a deep burgundy gown, diamonds at her throat, and the expression of a queen supervising servants before a coronation. "Julian tells me you finally agreed to be useful," she said. "He said the staff was short. The staff is adequate. We need you visible in the correct position as a maid. Do not be vulgar, as household support. Why is the family crest on the apron?" "It reminds people you belong to this house through service." I looked at her reflection in the mirror. "You know about Vivienne. Everyone with eyes knows Julian needs a more suitable partner. He is married. Marriage is not a prison." "Then why not let him divorce me before the gala?" "Because the contract requires stability. So I am useful as evidence of stability but unsuitable as a guest. You finally understand." She placed a velvet box on the table. Inside was a diamond bracelet I recognized from Cross Meridian's audit. The company had paid for it. "Vivienne will wear this tonight," Eleanor said. "Deliver it to her suite." The bracelet was purchased with corporate funds. Her eyes narrowed. "How would you know?" "I saw an invoice. You have been snooping. I handle household accounts, remember? Those documents are beyond your understanding. Julian authorized the purchase for investor relations." By placing diamonds on his mistress, Eleanor slapped me. The sound was sharp, but the pain arrived later. "Do not use that word in my home." I touched my cheek. "Your home? My family built this estate. The lender owns it. Julian controls the lender relationship." "Does he?" She smiled. "A woman with no income should not challenge the people who house her. How much do you believe I own?" "Less than the bracelet in your hand." "Then tonight should be educational." She took the box and pressed it against my chest. "Deliver it. Smile. And remember that when Julian divorces you, cooperation may persuade us to provide a small apartment." I carried the bracelet to Vivienne's suite. She stood before a mirror while stylists adjusted a silver gown designed to resemble liquid metal. The room contained flowers Julian had ordered under my household account. Vivienne dismissed the stylists when she saw me. "You brought the bracelet." "Yes." She extended her hand without turning. "Put it on." I placed the box on the table. "You can manage." She looked at me through the mirror. "Julian said you understood tonight's arrangement. I understand it better than he does." "Do you?" She opened the box and smiled at the diamonds. "You must know the marriage has been over for some time. He still sleeps in my room. Habit. Guilt. Cowardice. Choose whichever preserves your pride. And you are comfortable becoming public before the divorce. The announcement concerns business. The messages concerning your future wedding suggest otherwise." Her smile disappeared. "You read his phone?" "No. Then you are guessing. June 15th at St. Aurelia Cathedral. 200 guests, ivory flowers, private trust formed after Riverside closes." She stared at me. "Julian had planned the ceremony while telling me we would discuss our marriage after the contract." "How do you know that?" "I read accurately." What do you want? One honest answer. Did you know I was the person financing Julian's company? She laughed. You? Yes or no? Julian built Cross Meridian himself. Rowan Crest provided loans because serious investors recognized his talent. And if Rowan Crest belonged to me, then you would not be standing here in a service uniform. That is what Julian thinks. Vivian closed the bracelet around her wrist. You should leave before guests arrive. Public rejection will hurt more than private acceptance. Thank you for your concern. I am not concerned. I simply disc scenes. You selected the wrong man for that. The gala began beneath a sky-threatening rain. Lights covered the estate gardens, a temporary glass pavilion extended from the ballroom toward the river. Screens displayed Cross Meridian's projects and a gold #1 representing the billion-dollar Riverside Crown contract. Staff moved through the rooms carrying champagne. I wore the uniform and kept my hair tied back. Beneath the white blouse was a black silk dress tailored by Vanguard's executive stylist, folded and secured so the outer uniform concealed it. Henderson called the idea theatrical. I told him symbolism had already been chosen for me. Vanguard security officers entered disguised as private guests and service managers. Court receivers waited off-site. Compliance teams monitored every device connected to the corporate network. The Independent Credit Committee met through encrypted video. At 11:58, they would vote whether Julian's conduct triggered immediate acceleration. My ownership gave me influence but not unilateral authority. I had built Vanguard specifically to prevent one angry founder from destroying people through impulse. Every action required evidence, covenant review, and external legal confirmation. That governance protected Julian from the worst part of me and protected me from becoming another Eleanor. At 7, Julian descended the staircase in a black tuxedo while cameras flashed. He looked handsome, confident, and completely at home in a life I had purchased around him. Eleanor entered beside him. Vivian followed wearing the corporate-funded bracelet. Guests applauded. Julian saw me near the service station and gave a small approving nod. No one introduced me as his wife. A television host asked Eleanor whether Julian's family had supported him during difficult years. She placed one hand over her heart. A mother always knows greatness before the world recognizes it. I mortgaged everything to protect his dream. She had mortgaged nothing. The estate debt belonged to my trust. The rescue funds came from my capital, yet people applauded the performance because sacrifice sounded more convincing in diamonds. Vivian joined the interview. Julian's success comes from courage, she said. He never accepts limits imposed by conventional thinking. I almost laughed. Most of his limits had been quietly purchased and removed by me. At 8, Eleanor ordered me to serve the Ashcroft table. Malcolm Ashcroft accepted a glass without looking at my face. Vivian's mother recognized me as Julian's wife and raised her eyebrows. An unusual family tradition, she said. Apparently humility matters tonight, I replied. Eleanor heard and gripped my elbow. Do not speak unless addressed. She addressed me, then answer with gratitude. For what? The opportunity to remain useful. Several guests watched. Eleanor enjoyed public corrections because they demonstrated hierarchy. She pointed toward a drop of wine near Vivian's chair. Clean that. I reached for a cloth. Vivian moved her shoe directly into the spill, staining pale suede. Oh, she said. How careless. Eleanor looked at me. You heard her. The floor can be cleaned. Her shoe. A professional cleaner can handle suede. Kneel. The word carried across the nearby tables. Conversations slowed. Julian stood 10 feet away speaking with investors. He heard and chose not to intervene. Vivian crossed one leg over the other and extended the stained shoe. It would prevent permanent damage, she said. I looked at Julian. He met my eyes, then turned toward his guests. That was the moment I stopped looking for the man from the cafe. I placed the cloth on the table. No. Eleanor's face hardened. You will not humiliate this family tonight. I am not the person creating humiliation. You are a dependent woman wearing the uniform we provided. Kneel and clean the shoe. Ask Julian. Julian is the guest of honor. Then perhaps the woman behind his success should help him. Vivian smiled faintly. You have always been jealous. Of what? The life he is choosing. He has not yet discovered whether he can afford it. Eleanor seized my shoulder and pushed downward. I moved aside before she could force me. A waiter dropped a glass behind us. The sound brought cameras toward the confrontation. Julian finally approached. "What is happening? Your wife refuses a simple request," Eleanor said. "Arya, apologize. For declining to kneel?" "For creating a scene. Your mother created it. Do not argue." "Tell Vivian the bracelet must be returned to the company." His expression changed. "Not here. Tell your investors the Riverside contract is conditional. Enough." "Tell me about St. Aurelia Cathedral." Vivian stood abruptly. Guests began whispering. Julian lowered his voice. "Go to the kitchen. Are you marrying her in June? We will discuss this privately." "You planned the wedding before filing for divorce. This marriage has existed in name only. You slept beside me 4 nights ago." His face flushed. "Do not be crude. Truth sounds crude when announced beside champagne." Eleanor raised her hand as though she might slap me again. I caught her wrist, not violently, firmly enough that she understood the relationship had changed. "Do not touch me again." She stared at my hand. "Security." 2 guards approached. Vanguard's undercover security director stepped between them. "Mrs. Cross has not threatened anyone," he said. Eleanor looked at his badge. "You work for us." "I work for the property's legal security administrator." "Julian, fire him." Julian's phone vibrated. So did the phones of several executives. The Independent Credit Committee had requested final confirmation of the ethics violations. Public humiliation of a spouse was not itself grounds for acceleration. But misuse of secured corporate assets, concealed conflicts, fraudulent stability certification, diversion of funds, and proposed unauthorized marital trust transfers were. Henderson sent me one message. Evidence threshold met. Final vote at 11:58. I replied, "Protect all innocent. Purdy's proceed." Julian grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the staff corridor. "You are trying to destroy me. I asked for honesty. You embarrassed Vivian in front of her father. You purchased her jewelry with company funds. The expense was strategic. So is embezzlement when written by a consultant." He released me. "Who have you been talking to?" "People who read covenants. You know nothing about my financing. You owe senior lenders $187 million. Personal guarantees secure $46 million. The estate mortgage has 3 acceleration triggers. Cross Meridian's bridge facility depends on accurate executive certification. The Riverside commitment is conditional on Vanguard's continued support." His face went still. "Where did you get those numbers?" "You signed them. Those files are confidential." "Not from the lendery." "Rowan Crest?" "Yes." "You work for them?" "In a manner of speaking." "Did they send you to monitor me?" "I created the structure before our wedding." "What are you saying?" "I am saying you should not sign anything else tonight. You are bluffing. Ask your chief financial officer whether every debt instrument received a transfer notice this morning." He pulled out his phone. His CFO did not answer because Henderson's compliance team was interviewing him under a preservation agreement. Julian's confidence flickered. "What have you done?" "Purchase the remaining debt." "You?" "Vanguard." "Why would Vanguard buy my family loans?" "Because the portfolio exposed fraud linked to a $1 billion project." "You have no authority at Vanguard. Wait until dawn." His fear converted quickly into anger. "You planned this. You let me bring investors here. You brought them using false representations. You wanted public revenge, partly." He looked surprised. "Then you admit it." "Yes, that is why I placed every legal decision beyond my sole control." "You are insane. Your attorney drafted a competency clause for me last month." "Choose another insult." He stepped closer. "Leave the property before I have you removed." "The property manager will not obey. This is my family estate. Read the mortgage. I built everything inside these walls." "No, Julian, you decorated debt." He walked away before I could say more. At 9, the formal program began. Julian stood on stage beneath the Cross Meridian logo and described the company's rise from failure to global leadership. He thanked Eleanor for mortgaging the estate, though she had possessed no clear title to mortgage. He thanked Malcolm Ashcroft for believing in the Riverside vision. Then he thanked Vivienne. "Every successful man eventually meets the person who sees not only what he is, but what he could become," he said. "Vivienne has been the intelligence, courage, and grace behind this victory." Cameras found her. She approached the stage while guests applauded. Julian kissed her hand. My name was never spoken. I stood near the kitchen doors wearing the apron and remembered every night I spent reviewing his numbers after he slept. Every executive I persuaded not to abandon him, every debt payment my trust delayed. Every employee payroll Vanguard funded during crises, and every time I told myself recognition did not matter because love knew the truth. Love did not know. Love had accepted the benefits and rewritten the source. Julian continued. Tonight, we do more than celebrate a contract. We begin a new era for Cross Meridian and the Cross family. Vivian joined him beneath the lights. Eleanor took the stage carrying a velvet document folder. The papers inside established a personal trust for Julian and Vivienne and described the Riverside contract as a marital partnership property once they married. It was not a marriage license, but it publicly declared their future. Julian looked toward me near the service corridor. Certain private matters remain unresolved, he said, but progress cannot wait for those who refuse to grow. Several guests followed his gaze. The humiliation was complete because he wanted it complete. He needed investors to see that I had been removed before legal divorce created instability. At 10, staff rolled out a scale model of Riverside Crown. At 11, Malcolm Ashcroft announced that his family would provide junior capital once Vanguard confirmed senior financing. Julian told the room confirmation would arrive at midnight. It would, just not in the form he expected. At 11:45, Henderson entered through the main doors wearing a dark suit and carrying no visible documents. He passed the reception line and came directly to me. Eleanor intercepted him. "Mr. Henderson, Julian's lawyers are in the library." "I am not here for Julian. Whom do you represent?" He looked at me. "Chairwoman Vale," Eleanor laughed. "Aria's lawyer, among other roles." Julian descended from the stage. "Henderson, why are you speaking to my wife?" "Because she requested my presence. You work for Rowan Crest. Rowan Crest is administered within Vanguard Capital. Then tell your credit committee we are ready to sign. The committee has reviewed the matter. Excellent. You may not find the result excellent." Julian looked at me. "What did you say to them?" "Nothing, unsupported." Henderson handed me a thin black folder. Inside were the committee resolutions, debt assignments, receivership petition, asset preservation order, and confirmation that Vanguard now controlled 100% of the senior Cross family debt and nearly all secured corporate obligations. "Final vote closes in 8 minutes," he said quietly. The independent directors approved acceleration 7-0, subject to the midnight execution of the false executive certification. Payroll, protected. Pensions, protected. Client escrow, segregated. Minority shareholders. Independent tender option offered. Household staff paid for 60 days. Temporary housing reserved. Proceed. Julian stared between us. "What are you proceeding with?" Henderson looked at the ballroom clock. "You will receive formal notice at 12:01. I demand an explanation now. You received explanations in every covenant you signed. This is extortion. It is enforcement. Vivienne joined us. My father will withdraw unless the financing is confirmed." "Your father should review the project disclosures before investing," Henderson said. "Who are you to advise him?" "Counsel to Vanguard Capital's controlling chairwoman." "Who is the chairwoman?" Henderson looked at me but did not answer. I removed the apron. Beneath the waistcoat, the black silk dress remained concealed until I unbuttoned the service jacket and let the outer layer fall away. A Vanguard stylist stepped from the side corridor and helped release the folded skirt. Within seconds, the servant uniform became a tailored floor-length black gown with a structured jacket beneath it. The transformation drew every camera. Eleanor stared. "What are you doing?" "Changing positions." Julian laughed uneasily. "A dress does not make you important." "No, ownership does." The clock reached 11:58. Henderson's phone displayed the final independent vote, approved. Julian returned to the stage because he believed public confidence could overpower private uncertainty. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "at midnight Cross Meridian will receive final confirmation of Vanguard's senior financing, securing the $1 billion Riverside Crown development." Applause began. He invited Vivienne and Malcolm beside him. Eleanor stood near the front glaring at me. A representative from Julian's law firm placed the Executive Moral and Stability Certification on the podium. It stated that no undisclosed related party transactions, misuse of funds, executive misconduct, or reputational conflicts existed. Julian signed at exactly midnight. Vivienne signed as strategic advisor. The lawyer countersigned. The screen announced financing confirmation pending. At 12:01, every phone in the room vibrated. The ballroom's decorative lights turned off. Emergency lighting remained. The music stopped. The Cross Meridian logo disappeared from the screens and was replaced by Vanguard Capital's silver crest. A calm automated voice announced, Midnight Tool activated. Senior debt accelerated. Disputed executive accounts frozen. Property cybership forward. Sorcerer control transfer pending. Gasps spread through the room. Julian grabbed the podium. Turn the lights back on. The property system did not respond to his access code. Eleanor shouted for security. Vanguard officers entered from the terrace, front hall, and service corridor carrying court documents rather than weapons. Court-appointed receivers followed with digital auditors and inventory teams. No one ran. No doors locked. Guests remained free to leave after preserving documents related to investments. Real power did not need panic. Julian's phone displayed access revoked. Vivian looked at her bracelet as though diamonds might explain the screen. Malcolm Ashcroft demanded to speak to Vanguard's owner. Henderson stepped onto the stage. Cross Meridian Holdings has violated senior financing covenants through undisclosed related party transfers, diversion of secured funds, false certification, concealment of executive conflicts, misuse of corporate assets, and attempted movement of collateral into a private marital trust. Vanguard Capital and affiliated entities now hold 100% of the Cross family's secured debt and controlling rights over the company's senior obligations. Julian turned toward me. You bought my debt, I already owned most of it. You? Vanguard did. You are a housewife. I am also Vanguard's founder and controlling chairwoman. The screens changed. My corporate portrait appeared beside a global portfolio map. Aria Vale, funder, executive chairwoman, Vanguard Capital. Voting control, 61%. Managed assets, $84.7 billion. Beneath the ownership chart appeared Rowan Crest Trust, the silent investor that had rescued Cross Meridian from bankruptcy, financed the estate, purchased Julian's loans, and supported the Riverside proposal. Beneficial controller, Aria Val. The room went completely silent. Vivian gripped the podium. Eleanor looked from the screen to me and then to the apron on the floor. Julian whispered no. Henderson continued. Chairwoman Vale created the original rescue structure 7 years ago, but all enforcement decisions tonight were approved by an independent credit committee after documented covenant violations. Malcolm Ashcroft stepped away from Julian. You told me Rowan Crest was committed. It was, Julian said. She manipulated them. She is them, Vivian whispered. Julian descended the stage and approached me slowly. Why didn't you tell me? I nearly did before our wedding. Then why hide this? Security, privacy, and the hope that you could build confidence without feeling diminished by my wealth. You let me believe I saved the company. You worked hard. So did thousands of employees, but Vanguard provided the capital, risk protection, and introductions that made recovery possible. You tested me. Later, yes. At first, I protected you. This is a trap. You signed false certifications without knowing who the lender was. My identity did not create the fraud. You watched me build a relationship with Vivienne. I discovered it 11 months ago. His face changed. 11 months? I ordered an independent audit, acting, and you stayed in my bed. I wanted one honest conversation. You wanted revenge. Partly. The guests shifted closer, listening. That is why I recused myself from the credit vote. My anger explains why I am standing here. It does not create the debt, evidence, or court orders. Eleanor recovered enough to speak. You deceived this entire family. I financed this entire family. You pretended to be poor. I lived simply. You allowed me to call you useless. I was waiting to see whether Julian would stop you. That is emotional manipulation. Perhaps. It was still your choice to slap me, order me to kneel, and treat service as the price of belonging. She pointed at the screens. You cannot take our home. The estate belongs to Vanguard Residential Trust. Your family occupied it under an agreement tied to lawful company conduct and truthful financial disclosures. The Cross family owned this land before you were born. Henderson displayed the title history. The estate had been foreclosed, purchased by Vanguard, and restored through Rowan Crest 7 years earlier. Eleanor stared at the documents. Julian told me he saved it. I told her an investor helped, Julian said. You never asked which one. Because a wife should have told her husband. A husband should have disclosed his mistress, corporate theft, and planned wedding. Vivian removed the bracelet as though it had burned her. I did not know corporate money paid for this. The invoice was approved by your consulting company, I said. Julian said it was a legitimate board gift. Your company billed monthly personal services as market strategy. I was advising him. In hotel suites, her face went pale. You had me investigated. The secured lender investigated misuse of funds. You could destroy my family. Your father has not yet invested. He is free to walk away. Malcolm Ashcroft closed his folder. We are withdrawing immediately. Julian turned on Vivienne. Tell him the contract remains viable. Without Vanguard, there is no senior capital, Malcolm said. Without senior capital, your equity claim is worthless. I can find another lender. Henderson answered. All secured debt has accelerated. Cross Meridian enters court-supervised restructuring at dawn. New lending requires receiver approval. You are taking my company. Your employees and legitimate projects will continue under interim management, I said. You are losing executive control because you misused funds and filed false certifications. You plan to replace me. The independent board will select qualified management. I founded Cross Meridian. Your employees built it. You used it as a personal wallet. Eleanor stepped between us. Arya, listen to me. Whatever Julian did, marriage requires forgiveness. Did marriage require him to announce Vivian as the woman behind his success while I served her champagne? Men in his position need suitable partners. Then he may pursue her without my capital. You are punishing him because he chose a better woman. No, I am ending financial support because he committed fraud, violated debt covenants, and used my invisibility as permission to erase me. You are still the woman who ate at our table. I paid for the table. Eleanor's mouth opened. No sound came. Julian looked toward the ballroom exits where guests were already calling attorneys, canceling investment commitments, and distancing themselves from the Cross name. What happens now? He asked. The company enters restructuring. Lawful employees remain paid. Client projects continue. Misused funds are traced. The Riverside proposal returns to competitive review. And me? You surrender executive access. Cooperate with auditors, return disputed assets, and retain independent counsel. Will I be arrested? The evidence involving false statements, fund diversion, and attempted asset concealment will be referred to regulators and prosecutors. I do not decide charges. The estate receivership begins now. You, Eleanor, and lawful residents may collect immediate essentials from the private suite. Remaining property will be inventoried. Temporary accommodation has been arranged. Eleanor stared at me. You are evicting your husband and his mother at midnight? The commercial event ends tonight. Residential removal follows the court order at dawn. Where are we supposed to go? A furnished apartment for 30 days. Followed by standard housing assistance. An apartment? Her disgust was immediate. You called me an ungrateful dependent while living in a property owned by my trust. I am your mother-in-law. That relationship did not make you the lender. Julian's expression shifted from fear to calculation. We can repair this. I will end things with Vivienne. I will issue a public statement recognizing your role. You can remain chairwoman privately while I manage Cross Meridian. Vivienne stared at him. You said you loved me. This is not the time. You planned our wedding. Vivienne, please. She removed the bracelet and threw it onto the stage. It struck the floor near Eleanor's feet. You told me Arya contributed nothing. I believed that. You told me the company was unencumbered. It would have been after Riverside closed. You used me to secure my father's money. We were building a future. With debt owned by your wife, their alliance collapsed exactly as the audit predicted. Vivienne stepped away, though not before Henderson's team served notice preserving her consulting records and disputed gifts. She was not detained. Her devices connected to the corporate investigation were copied under consent from counsel. Her lawful assets remained hers. She looked at me before leaving. Did you enjoy this? Some of it. The admission surprised her. At least you are honest. Honesty arrived too late to save any of us tonight. Eleanor's blood pressure rose and a medical team evaluated her before transport. No one dragged her into the rain. No one denied medication. The receivers allowed her to collect jewelry purchased with independent funds, clothing, photographs, and documents. Items purchased through misused company accounts were tagged for review. Julian watched staff remove his executive devices and replace them with a basic phone containing counsel's number. "You always said money did not matter," he said to me. "It mattered enough for you to hide. Privacy is not indifference. You made me feel like a man. I protected you from failures you needed to understand. Then this is your fault. My rescues helped create your entitlement. Your affair and fraud remain yours. Did you ever love me?" The question hurt because the answer was still yes in forms I no longer trusted. I loved the man in the cafe who asked whether trust could be rebuilt. He is still here. Then he spent 11 months lying to me. I was afraid of being small beside you. You did not know who I was. I knew you saw through me. That was enough. Why, Vivienne? She admired me. I admired you before success. You knew too much about the beginning. So you chose someone who knew only the performance. He looked toward the darkened ballroom. Can we start over? Not while your first instinct is asking the lender instead of the wife. At 4:30 in the morning, most guests had left. Auditors remained. Staff packed food for shelters and night shift hospitals. Cross Meridian's honest employees received messages confirming payroll and operations. The press gathered beyond the estate gates. Julian's attorneys negotiated access to records. Eleanor slept briefly in a private sitting room under medical observation. Vivian departed with her parents. At 5:45, dawn began over the river. The court receiver invited Julian, Eleanor, Henderson, and me to the front terrace for formal delivery of possession notices. The estate was not empty, despite the dramatic version later spread online. Furniture was inventoried rather than removed in one violent night. Corporate-owned artwork, leased vehicles, and disputed luxury goods were secured. Personal photographs, family heirlooms, clothing, and necessary property remained protected. Julian carried one suitcase. Eleanor carried two. Their temporary apartment waited with heating, food, and medical access. Yet when they stepped beyond the front doors, they looked like people who had lost everything, because the things they valued most were not safety or shelter, but status, control, and the belief that other people existed beneath them. Henderson handed me a consolidated debt certificate. Vanguard Capital and affiliated trusts now hold 100% of the secured cross-family obligations. He announced for the legal record. The acquisition closed at 5:31. All enforcement remains subject to court supervision and restructuring protections. Julian looked at the document. "You bought even my personal loans." "The available secured portfolio," I said. "Club balances, vehicles, estate guarantees, company debt, and bridge facilities." Why? To prevent fragmented creditors from destroying employees and clients while pursuing you. That sounds almost kind. It is structured control and revenge. Some. Eleanor began crying. "Arya, I treated you harshly because I believed you lacked ambition. I was trying to make you stronger. You tried to make me kneel. I lost my temper. You called me an eater of your son's bread while my company paid every household bill. I did not know. Would that treatment have been acceptable if I were poor?" She stared at the driveway. "No." "You do not sound certain. I am humiliated. That is not the same as remorse." She reached for my hand. I stepped back. "You cannot leave us with nothing. You have personal pensions, lawful savings, temporary housing, medical coverage, and the opportunity to rebuild without using secured corporate assets. You are blocking my accounts. Only disputed and trust-funded accounts. Your independent pension remains accessible. What about my car, leased through Cross Meridian? My jewelry? Some pieces were purchased through company funds. Others are yours. My social commitments, not a legal asset." Her face hardened through tears. "You have always hated me. I spent years hoping you might value me without knowing what I owned. Then you wanted me to fail. I wanted you to choose decency before status forced it." Julian stepped forward. "Do not speak to my mother like that. You allowed her to strike me." He looked away. "I did not see it. You saw her order me to kneel. I was managing investors." "Exactly." The receiver opened the vehicle door. Eleanor entered without another word. Julian remained. "Will you block my number?" he asked. "My attorney will handle legal communication. Personal contact ends for now." "How long? Do not build your recovery around access to me. You rehearsed that. I learned it through experience." "Arya, please. The company will not abandon innocent employees. Your basic dignity will not be removed. But I am finished financing your consequences." He looked toward the mansion. "I thought this belonged to me." You thought everything that saved you belonged to you. He entered the car. As it drove away, 11 calls appeared on my phone before the vehicle reached the gate. 3 from Julian, 5 from Eleanor, 2 from Julian's private attorney, and 1 from Vivienne. I did not answer. I blocked the personal numbers and left legal channels open. Then I walked through the quiet ballroom, picked up the discarded apron, and placed it inside an evidence box beside the corporate-funded bracelet. Henderson found me there. The board wants a statement. Later. Reporters are calling it the most dramatic debt takeover of the decade. It was a covenant enforcement. That will not become the headline. Then make the documents boring enough to outlive the headline. What will you do with the estate? I looked around at the tables, flowers, and stage where Julian had introduced another woman as the source of his success. Give it away. To whom? Women rebuilding after financial abuse, coercive marriages, and economic dependence. The property is valuable, so are safe exits. The Cross Estate reopened a year later as the Vale Center for Financial Independence, providing temporary housing, legal assistance, business training, childcare, and emergency support for women leaving abusive or economically coercive relationships. The ballroom became a free legal clinic. Eleanor's East Wing became transitional apartments. Julian's private office became a forensic accounting classroom, where survivors learned to identify hidden debt, forged signatures, and asset manipulation. The room where Vivienne prepared for the gala became a career studio. I kept no private suite there. A building constructed from one family's need for status became a place where people learned that dependence did not eliminate personhood. Cross Meridian survived under court-supervised restructuring. The company was not erased because 12,000 employees, contractors, and clients had not participated in Julian's deception. An independent board removed him as chief executive. Legitimate divisions continued. The Riverside Crown project returned to bidding and was later awarded to a consortium after transparent review. Vanguard recovered part of its loans over 7 years. Minority investors received protected options. Employees gained representation on the board. The public wanted a simpler ending in which I snapped my fingers and destroyed Julian's empire overnight. Real responsibility required preserving what innocent people had built while removing the man who mistook their work for personal throne. Regulators investigated all certifications, related party payments, and attempted asset transfers. Julian pleaded guilty to financial misrepresentation, misuse of secured corporate funds, and obstruction after his attorneys negotiated a settlement that included restitution, a 3-year sentence, and a long prohibition from serving as an executive of regulated financial companies. He was not banned from every industry by my command because no lawful system allowed that. His reputation made senior roles difficult, but after release, he worked as an operations consultant for a small manufacturing cooperative. His salary was less than the monthly cost of the cars he once leased. At first, he wrote letters blaming me for allowing him to believe his own success. You controlled the money and hid the risks, he said. You let me think I was leading. I answered once. I protected you from consequences and confused that with love. That was my mistake. The false statements, affair, and misuse of funds were your choices. Months later, he wrote again. Every rescue made failure feel temporary. Every secret intervention allowed me to believe instinct had saved me. When you asked hard questions, I felt exposed. Vivienne admired the version of me created by your support without knowing the support existed. I chose her because admiration was easier than accountability. That letter sounded more like the man from the cafe. It did not restore trust. He continued therapy, completed restitution, and stopped asking for access to Vanguard. 5 years after the gala, we met in a mediator's office to finalize the remaining divorce matters. Our divorce itself had concluded earlier because the affair, fraudulent post-nuptial attempt, and financial misconduct made prolonged litigation pointless. I kept assets that had always been mine. Julian retained lawful personal property and a modest settlement required by marital law, though he received no share of Vanguard's premarital and protected trust holdings. Do you regret marrying me? He asked during our final meeting. No. After everything, the early years were real. Regret would turn every good memory into evidence I was foolish. Were you foolish? I was generous without boundaries and secretive without understanding the emotional cost. That sounds like blame shared politely. Responsibility is not arithmetic. My secrecy did not force your betrayal, but my rescues helped you avoid developing humility. He nodded. Do you forgive me? I no longer need you punished beyond what law and consequence already required. That is not forgiveness. It is what I can offer. Could we ever be friends? Not now. Later, build a life that does not require an answer from me. He looked toward the window. You really did create everything. Not alone. But you were behind it. Yes. I called Vivian the woman behind my success. You did. I think I knew that was a lie even before learning about Vanguard. Why say it? Because I wanted the room to confirm a story where I owed you nothing. We left separately. Eleanor avoided criminal charges because evidence did not show she understood the full corporate fraud. Though she had participated in harassment and attempted asset concealment, she lost access to trust-funded luxury, the estate, and cross-meridian accounts. She lived on her pension in an ordinary apartment and told relatives I had stolen the family legacy. Most relatives believed her until court records became public. She wrote demanding the return of jewelry and vehicles. Henderson answered through formal channels. Later, her letters changed. I measured women by how well they improved a man's status, she wrote. I hated your simplicity because I mistook visibility for value. Vivian reflected the family I wanted people to see. You paid for the family that existed. I was cruel before I knew you were powerful, which means ignorance cannot excuse me. I read the letter twice. I did not visit immediately. Recognition mattered, but access required safety. 2 years later, we met at the Vale Center in the former estate library. Women worked with lawyers at tables where Eleanor once hosted charity committees. She looked smaller in a plain navy coat. You gave strangers my rooms, she said. They were never legally yours. I know that now. Do you resent them? No. I resent that you made the house useful after removing us. The house became useful because I stopped treating family comfort as its highest purpose. She looked around. Do they know what happened here? Some. Not all. Do they know I made you kneel? I did not kneel. I wanted you to. Yes. Tears filled her eyes. I remember your face after I slapped you. You looked at Julian, waiting for him to defend you. He turned away. That was when the marriage ended for me. I raised him to believe love meant protection from shame. And he chose the person who reflected admiration. I did that. He made his own choices. She nodded. Do you hate me? No. Do you love me? Not in a way that creates a relationship. She accepted limited contact after that. Supervised at first, then occasional calls. I did not restore an allowance. I ensured she knew how to access ordinary medical services, not because she was entitled to my wealth, but because denying care would have turned boundaries into revenge. She died years later after a stroke. Her advance directive named an independent professional rather than Julian or me. That choice showed she had learned something about control. I attended the funeral and spoke honestly about her elegance. Ambition, fear of poverty, devotion to appearances, and capacity for harm when status felt threatened. I did not turn her into a saint or a monster. Complexity did not remove accountability. Vivian's involvement ended differently. Her father withdrew from Riverside and forced her to resign from the family office after the consulting transfers became public. She cooperated with investigators, returned the bracelet and other gifts purchased through Cross Meridian, and avoided charges by proving she did not know the full debt fraud. She knew Julian was married and participated in concealment. That was betrayal, but not every betrayal was a felony. She later sent me a letter. I thought powerful men created rooms, and women like us competed for the safest seat, she wrote. You owned the building, the debt, and the exit, yet you spent years pretending you did not. I mistook your restraint for weakness because that belief benefited me. I did not answer. Not every accurate apology required a relationship. Vanguard Capital changed after the scandal. I could no longer defend a culture built around my anonymity while criticizing Julian for erasing the source of his success. I revealed my identity publicly, not as a spectacle of wealth, but as an admission that secrecy had consequences. At our annual meeting, I stood before employees and said, hidden leadership protected investments and personal security, but it also allowed intermediaries to receive credit, distorted accountability, and encouraged mythology. No institution should depend on invisible ownership. We expanded employee voting rights, conflict review systems, and protections for spouses whose labor or capital supported founders without formal recognition. Vanguard created a financial abuse response fund, independent of the Vail Center, helping people whose partners forged debt, concealed assets, weaponized housing, or used economic control to trap them. We also changed our lending covenants. The ethical conduct clause remained, but no longer allowed broad interpretation by one committee. Enforcement required documented financial impact, independent legal review, employee protections, and appeal. My case had ended correctly because evidence was extensive, but power should not depend on hoping every chairwoman remained restrained while humiliated. Henderson retired 7 years after the gala. At his final board meeting, he handed me the black folder used during midnight protocol. "You were right to protect employees," he said. "You were right to insist on evidence. And wrong about what? You wore the apron because part of you wanted suffering to reveal truth. It did. It also hurt you unnecessarily. I know. Do not become addicted to rooms discovering who you are. That warning seems popular. Because secret billionaires are emotionally predictable." I laughed. "What will you do in retirement? Advise people who think marriage is an acceptable substitute for due diligence. A large market. Endless." I eventually stepped down as Vanguard's executive chairwoman and transferred more control into employee, public benefit, and independent governance trusts. No future spouse, child, parent, or sibling could inherit absolute authority simply through proximity to me. Leadership required qualification, review, and accountability. Some investors said founder control protected the company's long-term values. I answered that institutions should not rely permanently on one person's emotional health. The person activating Midnight Protocol had once stood in a ballroom wearing a servant's apron while her husband praised his mistress. Governance needed to survive a worse night and a less disciplined owner. Years after leaving daily leadership, I returned alone to the Vail Center during a dawn rainstorm. Residents were sleeping. A night counselor sat at the reception desk, helping a woman complete emergency bank forms after her husband emptied their joint account. The old ballroom lights were dim. No cameras waited. No investors applauded. I walked to the place where Eleanor ordered me to kneel and found a children's play area built beside the former stage. A little girl was drawing at a table while her mother spoke with an attorney. She looked up at me and asked whether I worked there. "Not exactly," I said. "Do you own it?" "A public trust owns it." "What does that mean?" "It means no one person can take it away because they are angry." She considered that, then returned to her drawing. That explanation felt more important than every headline. The world remembered a hidden chairwoman forced to serve her husband's mistress, a midnight debt seizure, a dawn eviction, and a family collapsing after discovering the maid owned their financial future. The title was dramatic and incomplete. I did not personally drag Julian into the rain. Court receivers enforced lawful orders. I did not freeze every account. Disputed funds were preserved while basic needs remained protected. I did not destroy Cross Meridian. The company survived because employees deserved more than becoming collateral in a marriage. I did not blacklist Julian across an entire industry. He faced legal restrictions, reputational consequences, and the ordinary difficulty of rebuilding trust, and I did not become powerful when I removed the apron. I had been powerful while carrying the tray. That was the lesson people often missed. My dignity did not begin when screens displayed Vanguard's assets. Eleanor's demand was wrong before she knew I controlled the estate. Julian's betrayal was wrong before he discovered I owned his debt. Vivian's contempt was wrong before she saw my title. Wealth made consequences visible. It did not create my humanity. For years, I believed silent sacrifice made love pure because it demanded no recognition. In reality, sacrifice without disclosure and boundaries can become a system where one person gives, another receives, and both gradually forget that consent matters. I rescued Julian until he believed rescue was the natural response to his risk. I hid my strength so he would not feel small, then watched him make me smaller to preserve himself. I accepted Eleanor's insults because I thought exposing wealth would contaminate the relationship, but relationships already become contaminated when decency depends on status. The final freedom was not buying 100% of their family debt. It was understanding that I no longer needed to use money to make anyone recognize what they should have seen without it. On the anniversary of the gala, I received an unmarked envelope forwarded through Henderson's old office. Inside was a photograph from the cafe where Julian and I first met. We were sitting across from each other, both laughing, his unpaid invoices stacked beside my coffee. On the back he had written, "I am sorry I became a man who needed you invisible. There was no request, no phone number, and no plea for another chance. I placed the photograph in a drawer rather than destroying it." The man in the cafe had been real. The man at the gala had also been real. Accepting both protected me from turning betrayal into the only story of my life. I walked to the window of my apartment and watched the city wake beneath the pale morning light. Years earlier, Julian believed Dawn would bring $1 billion victory, a new wife, and an empire finally free from the ordinary woman he kept near the kitchen. Instead, Dawn revealed that every road, loan, room, and title he depended on led back to the person he had ordered to serve. That revelation ended his illusion. But it did not define my future. I blocked the calls because distance was necessary. I preserved the company because justice required precision. I donated the estate because safety mattered more than possession. I transferred Vanguard's power because no person should own systems forever, and I stopped confusing being needed with being loved. Forced to serve my husband's mistress as a maid at his Victory Gala. I removed the apron at midnight and revealed that Vanguard Capital had acquired every secured debt supporting his family, company, vehicles, and mansion. By dawn, the contracts were frozen, his executive authority had ended, and receivers controlled the estate. Those were the facts people repeated. The truth beneath them was quieter. I had built his success to protect the man I loved, and he used that success to erase the woman beside him. My revenge lasted one night. My freedom began the next morning when the phone rang for the 12th time, and I finally understood that refusing to answer was not cruelty. It was the first decision in years that belonged entirely to me. Goodbye.